Our supermarket was a small place in the heart of Malabo, with bright lights that never seemed to turn off even when the city around us went quiet at night. I had always loved working in the daytime when the sun shone on the streets and the market smelled fresh with fruits and spices, but my husband, Miguel, wanted me to work nights. At first I did not understand why he insisted, but over time I realized it was because he wanted to spend the days with me and not have me tired from work. He thought night work was strange for a woman, and I thought daytime work was better for my health and mood. We argued about it many times, sometimes shouting in the kitchen, sometimes speaking quietly with tension hanging between us like a cloud. I loved Miguel, but I also felt trapped. I wanted independence. I wanted to feel that my choices mattered. One evening after another argument, I decided to start the night shift. It was supposed to be temporary, just a few weeks until things settled between us, but it became the start of something I had never expected. My night shifts were quiet at first. Most nights I spent stocking shelves, cleaning, and arranging the fresh vegetables and bread. Customers trickled in slowly, usually workers returning from late jobs or people stopping by after a long day. One night, a man came in just as I was finishing arranging the oranges. He looked tall and serious, with eyes that seemed to notice everything in the store. He introduced himself as Baltasar. At first, I thought he was just another customer. He bought a few items, paid, and left. But then he came back the next night, and the next, always at the same time. He would ask questions about the products, about my opinion on certain fruits or snacks, and sometimes he would smile in a way that made my heart beat faster. It was strange at first. I had never felt this kind of attention before, especially not from someone so confident and calm. Miguel was not unkind, but our arguments and our different ideas about work had created a distance between us. With Baltasar, I felt a spark, something I had forgotten existed inside me. We started talking more. I told him small things about my life, my favorite foods, my dreams. He listened carefully and shared his thoughts too. He spoke about his work, about the projects he was managing, about the city and its people. His voice was calm but full of power, and I found myself drawn to it every night. Soon, our conversations became longer. I would find excuses to linger near him while he shopped, to ask questions about his day, to share little laughs that Miguel would have never understood. There was a thrill in our secrecy. I knew what I was doing was wrong in one way, but it also felt alive in a way my marriage had not felt for months. It was as if I had been asleep for a long time and someone had suddenly opened a window to the night sky, letting in stars I had never seen. Over time, I realized I was falling for Baltasar. It was not only the attention or the mystery. It was the way he seemed to understand me, the way he treated me like a person, not just a wife, not just a worker. When he smiled at me, I felt seen. When he asked my opinion, I felt important. And at night, when I returned home to Miguel, I felt torn. I loved my husband, I had built a life with him, but my heart had begun to wander. The tension grew as days passed. I would lie awake thinking about Baltasar, wondering if I could ever tell anyone, wondering if it was wrong to feel happiness in this stolen world. Our supermarket became my stage, my hiding place, my secret world. Baltasar and I would meet quietly during his visits. Sometimes it was only a word or a look, sometimes a hand brushed briefly against mine. Each moment was electric, each night I longed for the next. Miguel noticed a change in me too. He asked if I was tired, if I was unhappy, but I could not tell him the truth. I could not tell him that I had found someone who made me feel alive when I felt trapped. The weight of secrecy pressed down on me. I felt guilty, scared, and yet strangely exhilarated. My nights were full of emotion, full of longing, full of things I had never allowed myself to feel. Then one night, Baltasar came in and asked if I could help him after closing. I felt my heart jump. Alone in the empty supermarket, we talked for hours, sharing our lives, our dreams, our fears. I told him about my arguments with Miguel, about my desire to work days, about how tired I was of being trapped in expectations. He listened and held my hand. His hand was warm, strong, and reassuring. In that moment, I knew my life had changed. I could not go back to the way it had been. I did not know how it would end, but I knew my nights would never be the same, and so, my life became a delicate balance between day and night, between love and obligation, between the world I had built and the world I was discovering. Each night I worked at the supermarket, I waited for Baltasar, my secret light in the quiet streets of Malabo. Each day I returned home to Miguel, feeling the weight of choices and the complexity of love. It was a story that had no easy ending, but it was mine. It was a story of longing, of desire, of secrecy, of nights that whispered promises I had never dared to imagine. And through it all, the lights of the supermarket shone bright, reflecting the hope and fear in my heart, guiding me through a summer I would never forget. The day Baltasar showed his interest in me was a day I would never forget. I had been working the night shift at the supermarket for a few weeks, and by then, his visits had become more frequent. At first, it had been just small smiles and polite conversations, but that night, something changed. I was stacking cans of tomatoes on the top shelf when I felt a presence behind me. Rosa, he said softly, leaning a little closer than before. I turned and saw him standing there, his eyes fixed on mine. There was a weight in his gaze, a seriousness that made my heart skip. I could feel it in my chest, a strange mix of fear and excitement. He asked me if I wanted to sit with him for a few minutes after closing. My hands were shaking, but I nodded without hesitation. I wanted this more than I wanted to go home to my husband, more than I wanted to pretend everything was normal. After we closed the doors and the street outside was quiet, he took me to a small table in the corner of the supermarket, a place we had never used before. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if choosing each word with precision. He told me that he had noticed me from the very first night, that there was something about the way I smiled, the way I spoke, the way I moved that drew him in. I felt my face flush. I could not stop the thrill running through me. I wanted him, all of him, more than I had ever wanted anyone. Without thinking, I leaned closer, letting him see that I accepted him, that I wanted him. My heart was pounding. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt completely alive. I told him that I had never felt this way before, that I wanted him more than anyone else, more than my husband. There was a sharp pain as I admitted it to myself, but I could not stop. I wanted to be with Baltasar, to feel his attention, to share a life that had been missing from mine. I asked him, in a trembling voice, if he would consider a future with me, if he would ever think of us as more than just secret meetings at night. There was silence at first, and my stomach twisted with fear. Then he spoke, carefully, explaining that he had a wife. He said he was not ready to make a change at this moment. He spoke of obligations, responsibilities, and promises that tied him to someone else. His voice was gentle, but I could feel the truth in it. He was not rejecting me out of dislike, but because he was not ready yet. He said he could imagine a future with me, maybe next year, but for now, he could not leave his current life behind. I felt a mix of disappointment and understanding. I wanted him so badly that I could have ignored everything else, but I knew he had his own life, his own obligations. I promised to wait, even though waiting felt like a slow kind of torture. We agreed to meet in secret, to continue our conversations and our growing closeness, but without crossing lines that would make everything irreversible. The days that followed were filled with longing. I went home to Miguel, pretending everything was normal, while my mind was consumed with Baltasar. Each night at the supermarket became an escape, a place where I could breathe, where I could feel valued and alive. We shared small moments of intimacy, smiles, gentle touches, long conversations that lasted until closing time. Every night, I imagined a future with him, a life where I could be free from the constraints that had bound me. Miguel noticed my distance. He asked if I was tired, if something was wrong, but I could not tell him the truth. I could not tell him that my heart belonged elsewhere. Our arguments about working nights versus days became sharper. I wanted freedom and independence, he wanted stability and predictability. The tension in our home grew, but I held my secret tightly, knowing that the nights with Baltasar were the only place where I truly felt myself. Baltasar and I began to make small plans for the future. We spoke about traveling together, about small dreams we could share, about a life that would be ours someday. I confessed that I wished for a child with him, a symbol of the life I wanted to build. He listened carefully and held my hands, telling me gently that it was not the right moment, but that he imagined a future where that could be possible. His words gave me hope, but also sharpened the ache in my chest. I wanted him more than anything, and the wait was difficult. I began to dream about him constantly. In the supermarket, I would catch myself smiling when I thought of him, thinking about the way he looked at me, the way his voice sounded when he spoke directly to me. I felt alive in ways I had forgotten, but the guilt of hiding this from Miguel gnawed at me. I knew I was betraying him, yet I could not stop. The pull of Baltasar was too strong, the longing too deep. The city of Malabo became part of our secret story. Walking through the quiet streets at night, returning home after closing, I felt a strange duality. One part of me longed to escape and be with Baltasar openly, to leave behind the life that felt like a cage. Another part of me felt responsibility, guilt, and fear. The nights became a test of patience, desire, and self-control. Every encounter with Baltasar was charged with emotion, every glance a silent promise, every conversation a secret bridge between two worlds. And so, our story continued. I lived two lives, one in the daytime with Miguel, filled with obligation, silence, and routine, and one at night with Baltasar, filled with passion, longing, and the sense that life could be more than it seemed. Each night, I felt the pull of the future we might have together. Each night, I imagined a day when we could leave secrecy behind and live openly, when I could finally tell Miguel that my heart had changed, when the life I dreamed of could become real. I cannot stop thinking about that first night he showed his interest. It is engraved in my memory, the soft light of the supermarket, the quiet streets of Malabo, the way his eyes held mine as if he could see all the hidden parts of me. It was the night I began to accept my desire, the night I decided that my heart belonged to him, even if the world would never know it yet. From that moment on, every night was a test of patience, a dance of secrecy, a journey of emotions that I had never felt before. I could not imagine returning to life as it had been. Baltasar had awakened something in me, a desire to live, to feel, to dream. And I knew that waiting for him, for the day he would be ready, would be both the most difficult and the most exciting challenge of my life. I remember I was at the supermarket, preparing for my night shift, arranging shelves and checking the inventory. Baltasar had promised to meet me later, as he always did, but something felt different that evening. There was a tension in the air, a heaviness that I could not explain. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting to him. When he arrived, he was calm as usual, with his usual confident smile. But I noticed a shadow behind his eyes, a look that I had not seen before. We spoke as usual, about small things at first, but then he became serious. He told me he had heard rumors, strange whispers about his private life spreading through the city. I laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it. It could not be true, I told myself. Baltasar always seemed so controlled, so careful. How could anyone tarnish his image so easily? We spent the night together at the supermarket, our usual secret haven. There was an intensity in his gaze that night, almost a warning. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, but I did not dare. I felt a mixture of excitement and fear, a strange anticipation of something looming. We said goodbye in the quiet streets of Malabo, and I went home to Miguel, trying to act normal. But my heart was heavy. I could sense that things were about to change, though I did not know how. The next morning, the world changed. The scandal broke the internet like a storm. Baltasar, the man I had fallen for, was suddenly the subject of endless news and gossip. Videos were circulating online, showing him in compromising situations with dozens of women. I felt my stomach drop, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the posts. It was surreal. Everything we had shared, all our secret moments, were now exposed to the world. My name, my face, my life was suddenly caught in the whirlwind. Miguel noticed immediately. He came home, his eyes sharp, his voice trembling with anger and confusion. He asked me directly if it was true, if I had been involved. My mind raced. I wanted to deny it, to protect myself, but the truth could not be hidden. I admitted everything. I told him about Baltasar, about our secret meetings, about my longing and desire for someone else. Miguel's face fell, his disappointment cutting deeper than I could have imagined. The day of the scandal was chaotic. The city seemed different, as if every street whispered the news. People at the supermarket avoided my gaze, rumors floated in hushed voices, and even the streets outside seemed to pulse with tension. Baltasar disappeared from sight, as the media frenzy consumed him. I felt lost, abandoned, and guilty all at once. I had wanted him, needed him, and now the world knew. I was caught in the storm of my own making. I spent the day in a blur, moving between fear, sadness, and regret. I tried to talk to Miguel, but he would not listen. Our arguments became louder, sharper. He accused me of betrayal, of destroying the life we had built. I tried to explain my feelings, my loneliness, my longing for freedom, but my words felt weak against the tidal wave of anger and hurt. The supermarket became my only refuge, the one place where I could breathe without judgment. The day after the scandal, the weight of reality hit me harder than ever. Baltasar had released a statement, trying to explain, to defend himself, but the internet would not forgive so easily. I felt trapped between my love for him and the life I had with Miguel. The city seemed to judge me at every corner, whispers following me through the streets, every glance a silent accusation. I realized that the secret I had cherished for months was now a public burden, and I did not know how to carry it at home. Miguel avoided me, speaking only when necessary. The warmth and trust that had once existed between us were gone, replaced by coldness and distance. I thought of Baltasar constantly, imagining him somewhere in the city, also caught in the storm, also thinking of what might have been. Our secret world had been shattered, leaving only fragments of longing, guilt, and desire. That night, I returned to the supermarket one last time, standing in the empty aisles where we had shared so many moments. I thought of the nights, the whispers, the glances, the promises. I knew that things would never be the same. My heart ached for Baltasar, for the life I had imagined with him, but I also knew I had to face reality, to confront Miguel, to confront myself. The scandal had changed everything, but it had also revealed truths I could no longer ignore. I realized that I had been living a life divided, torn between desire and obligation, between love and secrecy. Now, with everything exposed, I had to decide what kind of life I wanted to live, and what kind of woman I wanted to be. The days that followed were long and difficult. I tried to find some semblance of normalcy at the supermarket, but every interaction, every customer, every colleague reminded me of the scandal. The whispers followed me, and I could feel the judgment of the city in every glance. At home, Miguel and I spoke less, the silence between us heavier than words. I knew that our marriage had changed, perhaps irreparably, but I also knew that I had awakened something in myself, something I could not ignore. I thought of Baltasar constantly. I wondered if he was safe, if he regretted our secrecy, if he thought of me as I thought of him. The world had judged us both, but in my heart, I still felt the spark, the connection, the longing that had begun months before in the quiet aisles of the supermarket. The scandal had torn open the secret world we had created, but it could not erase the emotions, the dreams, and the desires that had grown in that hidden space. And so, I began to navigate a new reality, a world of judgment, regret, and longing. Each day was a struggle, each night a reminder of what had been lost and what had been desired. I had loved secretly, longed secretly, dreamed secretly. Now, that secrecy was gone, and I had to find a way to live with the consequences, to face Miguel, to face myself, and to carry the memory of Baltasar in a world that had suddenly become too small, too loud, and too unforgiving. After the scandal broke, the first few days were the hardest. Every time I walked down the streets of Malabo, I felt eyes on me. People whispered as I passed, small townsfolk and colleagues from the supermarket alike. The city I had known all my life felt suddenly smaller, as if every corner was judging me, every step reminding me that my secret world had been exposed. I tried to avoid mirrors, afraid of seeing the reflection of the woman who had betrayed her husband and allowed herself to be swept into a forbidden love. At home, Miguel barely spoke to me. The silence between us was suffocating. I wanted to reach for him, to explain, to apologize, to beg for understanding, but his eyes avoided mine. He moved around the house with a quiet tension, as if he were holding back storms inside. I remembered the arguments about night work, about our life and routines, and I realized how fragile the trust between us had been even before Baltasar had entered my world. I spent the next night at the supermarket, my refuge and the place where I had first felt alive. The aisles were quiet, the shelves bright under the fluorescent lights. Normally, I would have felt excitement, anticipating Baltasar's arrival, but that night was different. I was anxious, afraid, uncertain. I kept thinking about what the scandal had done, not only to him, but to me. Everything we had shared in secrecy had suddenly become public, and I felt naked before the judgment of the city. When Baltasar arrived, I could see that he had aged a little in those few days. His eyes carried the same calm intensity, but there was a shadow of worry behind them. He smiled at me, but it was not the same confident smile I had been used to. I felt my chest tighten. He walked past the aisles, pretending to browse, but I knew why he had come to see me, to remind himself and me of the connection that had survived the chaos. We sat in our usual corner, the small table hidden behind the stacked boxes of rice and sugar. For a while, we said nothing, just looking at each other, our hands brushing occasionally. The silence was heavy but comforting, a reminder that we were still together, still sharing something that no one else could take away. I felt a wave of relief and sadness all at once. The world outside had changed, but inside the supermarket, there was still a space where we could exist freely. I told him about Miguel, about the tension at home, about the way our marriage had shifted in those days. Baltasar listened carefully, holding my hand, his touch firm and reassuring. He spoke softly, reminding me that he was not gone, that he had not forgotten me, and that we would find a way to be together when the time was right. His words gave me hope, but also a strange ache. I wanted him completely, without hesitation, but I also understood the weight of the scandal and the public eyes that now followed us. The days after the scandal were filled with constant tension. At the supermarket, customers avoided my gaze, and my colleagues whispered behind closed doors. I tried to act normal, but every interaction reminded me that our secret was now public knowledge. Each night, I would return home to Miguel, feeling guilty and exhausted, carrying the weight of desire and betrayal in my chest. Our conversations were minimal, and when he did speak, it was cold and clipped. The warmth that had once existed between us was gone, replaced by distance and tension. Despite everything, my longing for Baltasar did not fade. Every night, I waited for his arrival at the supermarket. Our conversations grew deeper, more intimate, filled with confessions, hopes, and dreams for a future we could not yet live. We spoke of travel, of leaving the city behind, of building a life together when the time was right. I told him again about my desire to have a child with him someday, and though he could not promise it immediately, he spoke of a future where it could happen. His voice, calm and full of reassurance, became a lifeline for me in the chaos that surrounded my life. Miguel began to confront me more directly. One evening, he asked me if I still loved him, if I wanted to remain married. His voice was quiet but sharp, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. I wanted to tell him the truth, but I also feared destroying him completely. I told him that I cared for him, that I valued the life we had built, but that my heart had been changed. He did not respond, and the silence that followed was heavier than words. I realized that our marriage, like the city outside, had been altered forever by the choices I had made. At the supermarket, Baltasar became my secret anchor. The world outside could judge, condemn, and gossip, but when I was with him, I felt alive. We spent hours talking, sometimes sharing stories of our childhoods, other times dreaming aloud about a life we might one day share. Each touch, each smile, each whispered word reminded me of the connection that had begun months ago, a connection that could not be destroyed even by scandal. The scandal also brought unexpected attention from friends and family. Some avoided me, uncomfortable with the news, while others spoke in whispers, offering judgment disguised as advice. I felt isolated, alone in the storm of public scrutiny. Yet the nights at the supermarket, with Baltasar, became a sanctuary. We talked about our fears, our desires, our hope for a future where we could exist openly. These moments, though fleeting, gave me the strength to face each day, to continue navigating the difficult path between my marriage, my secret love, and the world around me. The days in Malabo after the scandal felt heavier than usual, as if the city itself had shifted its gaze upon me. The streets, usually bustling with the rhythm of daily life, seemed suddenly sharper, more judgmental. The vendors called out their usual greetings, but now there was a pause, a subtle hesitation, as if they had already heard the whispers circulating through the neighborhoods. People who once smiled freely now glanced sideways, murmuring under their breath when I walked past. Even the sun seemed to glare at me differently, as if highlighting my shame in the busy city streets. Malabo was a city of layers, a mixture of tradition and modernity, of quiet alleys and bright markets, of families who had lived here for generations and newcomers trying to carve out a place for themselves. After the scandal, I noticed these layers in a new way. The market seemed smaller, as if the gossip had shrunk the space where I could move without scrutiny. The corners where children once played freely now felt like observation posts, eyes following my every step. Even the coastal breeze that usually brought relief carried with it the weight of judgment. Local gossip spread faster than the wind through the streets. I would hear it first in the supermarket, from colleagues speaking in hushed tones, from customers whispering as they passed by. Then it would reach the small cafes where friends and neighbors gathered, the benches near the cathedral where older women sat and spoke loudly about everyone in the neighborhood, and the small salons where hairdressers discussed every detail of life in Malabo. It felt as though every whisper carried my name, every conversation had my face, and there was no place in the city where I could hide. The pressure was relentless. At first, I tried to ignore it, to focus on the supermarket work, on Miguel, on anything that could give me a sense of normalcy. But the city refused to let me escape. I would walk past familiar faces and feel their eyes burning into me. I would sit in the bus or taxi, and someone would murmur, clearly audible, about the scandal, about Baltasar, about me. The whispers were not always harsh, but their constant presence created a pressure that weighed on my chest, making me anxious, self-conscious, and fearful. Even the supermarkets, which had once been a refuge, became a place of observation. Colleagues would give subtle glances, and some customers seemed to linger longer than necessary, studying me, trying to catch some hint of guilt or embarrassment. The aisles that had once been our secret haven with Baltasar now felt constrictive, reminding me of how fragile my world had become. Every movement, every word, every smile had to be measured carefully. A single misstep could lead to more gossip, more judgment, more exposure. Malabo itself seemed alive with the scandal. The cafes where men gathered to discuss politics buzzed with conversation, not about the government or the economy, but about the private lives of a few people they had once admired. Social gatherings, which had been filled with laughter and warmth, now carried an undercurrent of tension. Invitations stopped arriving, and people I had once considered friends now looked past me, offering polite nods but no engagement. I began to feel isolated, like a character caught in a story that everyone else was reading, but I could not control. Societal pressure in Malabo was subtle but powerful. The city had an invisible set of rules, a code that demanded respectability and obedience to social expectations. Women were judged more harshly than men, and any deviation from societal norms was noticed and commented upon. I felt that weight pressing on me constantly, reminding me that I had broken rules, that I had sought desire outside the marriage that the city deemed sacred. Even Miguel seemed to embody these expectations, his silence and coldness reflecting the judgment I felt from the entire community. I noticed the way my neighbors looked at me differently. Older women on the streets would shake their heads in disapproval, whispering to each other as I passed. Younger women avoided eye contact, as if fearful of being associated with me. Children stared curiously, unaware of the scandal but sensing the tension in their parents' voices. Men spoke less openly, but I could feel their judgment in lingering glances, in half-formed comments, in quiet conversations that stopped when I approached. Every interaction, no matter how small, became a reminder of the scandal and the pressure it brought. Even the cultural landmarks of the city seemed affected. The cathedral, once a place of quiet reflection, now felt like an arena of judgment, as if every visitor knew my story and silently watched me. The beaches and markets, where life once moved freely, now felt constricted, as if the gossip had built invisible walls around me. I walked these streets daily, trying to navigate normal life, but the weight of scrutiny was inescapable. Every smile I offered, every polite word I spoke, was filtered through the eyes of a city that now knew my secrets. I began to notice subtle changes in the supermarket, where I spent most of my nights. Some colleagues became cold, distant, offering minimal interaction. Others whispered in corners, glancing at me as if I were a spectacle. Customers, too, acted differently. Some avoided my gaze entirely, moving through the aisles quickly, while others lingered, subtly observing, trying to detect the scandal reflected in my demeanor. Even the night itself, which had been my refuge, now carried tension. The fluorescent light seemed harsher, the aisles narrower, the air heavier. The emotional atmosphere in Malabo became suffocating. I felt as though the city itself was pressing in on me, observing, judging, and whispering. My thoughts were consumed with anxiety, guilt, and longing. I longed for Baltasar, for the nights where the city did not exist, where only he and I shared a secret world. But now, even the supermarket, our sanctuary, was touched by the scandal, colored by societal pressure and the knowledge that the world outside was watching. Despite this, there were small moments of relief. Occasionally, a friend would approach cautiously, offering a kind word, a sympathetic glance, or a quiet conversation. These moments reminded me that not everyone in Malabo was consumed by gossip, that there were still people capable of understanding and empathy. But they were rare, and the city's judgment was constant and unrelenting. I began to notice the way my own mind responded to the pressure. Anxiety became a constant companion. I questioned every decision, every word, every action. I worried about Miguel, about Baltasar, about the public perception, and about my own heart. Sleep became difficult, as my mind replayed every whispered conversation, every sidelong glance, every rumor. The city that had once been familiar now felt alien, a labyrinth of judgment and expectation. Even the ordinary rhythms of life were colored by the scandal. Grocery shopping, commuting, attending small social events, all were fraught with tension. I became hyper-aware of how people spoke, how they looked at me, and how they might interpret every gesture. My sense of self, once confident and vibrant, was shaken. I began to doubt my choices, my desires, and my future. The pressure of the city and society weighed on me constantly, reminding me of the price I had paid for passion and secrecy. Yet in the midst of this, Baltasar remained a beacon. Despite the scandal, despite the gossip, despite the societal pressure, he did not disappear. He found ways to reach me, to speak to me, to remind me that the connection we had shared was real. Each encounter, though brief and clandestine, offered relief from the suffocating judgment of Malabo. His presence was a counterweight to the city's pressure, a reminder that life, love, and desire could survive even in the most difficult circumstances. I realized that the scandal had not only exposed secrets but had also revealed truths about the city, society, and myself. Malabo, with its beauty, energy, and tradition, was also a city of scrutiny, gossip, and unspoken rules. I had learned how quickly reputations could change, how swiftly whispers could spread, and how relentlessly society could judge. And yet, I had also discovered my own resilience, my capacity to navigate these pressures, and my ability to hold on to the things that mattered most. Even in the face of widespread judgment, the city became a mirror, reflecting both my mistakes and my desires. Every alley, every market, every cafe reminded me of the choices I had made and the life I wanted to pursue. I began to move through Malabo with more awareness, learning to balance fear and courage, judgment and desire. I understood that gossip and societal pressure were inescapable, but they did not have to define me. My life, my decisions, and my heart were mine, even if the city watched closely.